It was a day like any other in the small, dusty town of Red Creek. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked earth and wooden planks of the ranches that dotted the horizon. A gentle breeze carried with the scent of sagebrush and leather, mingling with the faint sound of hooves clattering against the dry ground. It was here, in this quiet corner of the Wild West, that the story of Sarah Whitmore began to unfold. A tale of mystery, loss, and an unexpected return. Sarah had been a widow for 2 years now, ever since her husband, Thomas, had ridden out one morning and never come back. They said he'd gone after some stray cattle that had wandered too far into the hills, but no one knew what truly happened to him. Some whispered about bandits. Others spoke of wild animals or accidents in the treacherous ravines. Whatever the truth may have been, Sarah didn't dwell on it much anymore. Life went on, and so did she, tending to their modest ranch alone. The ranch wasn't grand by any means. Just a few acres of land surrounded by barbed wire fencing, a small barn weathered by time and storms, and a house whose paint peeled under the relentless desert sun. But it was hers, and she took pride in keeping it running despite the hardships. She had only one companion left from the days when Thomas was alive, a cow named Clara. Clara was old, slow, and stubborn, but loyal as they came. She provided milk for Sarah's breakfast porridge and butter for her bread. And though she complained about the work sometimes, Sarah loved having Clara around, until one fateful evening. It started innocently enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah stepped outside to check on Clara before heading inside for supper. The air was cool now, carrying the promise of nightfall, and crickets chirped softly in the background. Clara stood near the fence post, chewing lazily on a tuft of grass, her large brown eyes gazing up at Sarah with that same calm indifference she always showed. But then something caught Sarah's eye, or rather, something caught Clara's mouth. Hanging loosely between the cow's teeth was a hat. Not just any hat. It was a stranger's hat, black and wide-brimmed, its surface scratched and scuffed from wear. Sarah froze, staring at it in disbelief. Clara lowered her head slightly, letting the hat drop to the ground with a soft thud. For a moment, all Sarah could hear was the wind rustling through the tall grass nearby. "Where did you find this?" Sarah murmured, bending down to pick up the hat. Her fingers traced the rough fabric, searching for clues. There were no initials embroidered anywhere, no obvious signs of ownership. Yet there was something unsettling about it, as if it carried secrets buried deep within its folds. Little did she know, this simple discovery would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The hat sat on the kitchen table, illuminated faintly by the moonlight streaming through the window. She tried to convince herself it was nothing. Perhaps a traveler had lost it somewhere along the road, and Clara had stumbled upon it during her daily grazing. But deep down, Sarah felt a nagging sense of unease. The hat seemed wrong, out of place, like it didn't belong in her world. By morning, the unease had grown into full-blown curiosity. After feeding Clara and milking her, Sarah decided to take a closer look at the surrounding area. Maybe she'd find more clues, something that might explain how the hat ended up in Clara's mouth. So, armed with nothing but determination and a sturdy walking stick, she ventured beyond the boundaries of her ranch. The landscape stretched endlessly before her, a sea of golden grasses, swaying gently in the breeze. In the distance, jagged mountains rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks kissed by the rising sun. To her right lay the riverbank, where willow trees leaned over the water, their branches dipping occasionally to disturb the still surface. It was beautiful country, yes, but also dangerous. Bandits lurked in these parts, prey on unsuspecting travelers, and Sarah knew better than to wander too far without caution. She walked for hours, her boots kicking up clouds of dust with every step. Just as she began to think she'd wasted her time, she spotted something unusual near the riverbank, a patch of disturbed earth, as if someone had dug there recently. Her heart quickened as she approached, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be connected to the hat, or was it merely coincidence? Crouching down, Sarah examined the dirt closely. It looked fresh, the soil loose and uneven. With trembling hands, she began to dig, brushing away the loose particles until her fingers brushed against something hard. Pulling it free, she gasped aloud. It was a gun holster, empty but unmistakably real. and attached to it was a belt buckle engraved with intricate designs, a starburst pattern radiating outward from a central point. Sarah stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. This wasn't just any buckle. It belonged to someone important, someone wealthy or influential, someone who wouldn't leave such a valuable item behind unless forced to. Her thoughts turned dark. Had there been a struggle here? Was the owner of the hat, and perhaps the gun, still alive? Or had they met a terrible fate? Refusing to give up, Sarah continued her search, her eyes scanning the area for anything else out of the ordinary. That was when she saw it, a trail of footprints leading away from the riverbank, disappearing into the dense forest beyond. Without hesitation, she followed them, her resolve strengthening with each passing moment. The forest was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen before. Towering pines blocked out most of the sunlight, plunging the interior into shadowy gloom. The air was cooler here, tinged with the earthy scent of moss and damp leaves. Birds called each other high above, their songs echoing eerily through the trees. Every creak of a branch or rustle of underbrush made Sarah jump, her nerves frayed to the breaking point. She pressed on, following the footprints until they led her to a clearing. At first glance, it appeared abandoned, an old campsite, perhaps, with remnants of fire pit and charred sticks scattered about. But then Sarah noticed movement at the edge of the clearing, a figure cloaked in darkness, watching her with unreadable eyes. "Who are you?" Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The figure stepped forward, revealing himself to be a man, his face lined with age and hardship. He wore a long coat, patched and faded, and his hair hung in greasy strands around his shoulders. "I could ask you the same question," he replied, his voice gravelly and low. "What brings you out here, miss?" "I'm looking for answers," Sarah said firmly. "Answers about a hat, a holster, and a trail that led me straight to you." The man's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his features. "Ah," he said finally. "You found my things, have you?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "And I want to know why they were left behind." The man sighed deeply, lowering himself onto a fallen log. "Sit down, miss," he invited, gesturing to the space beside him. "This is a story worth hearing, but it won't be easy." Reluctantly, Sarah obeyed, settling onto the log and bracing herself for whatever revelation was to come. His name was Elias Blackwood, once a respected lawman, in a town not far from Red Creek. But that life had ended abruptly 3 months ago, when a group of outlaws ambushed him and his deputies while they were transporting gold to the bank. Only Elias survived, escaping into the wilderness with little more than the clothes on his back. Since then, he'd been living off the land, avoiding civilization, and trying to forget the horrors he'd witnessed. "But that hat," Sarah interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's yours." Elias nodded solemnly. "Yes, I lost it during the ambush. Thought I'd never see it again." "And the holster?" Sarah prompted. "That belonged to my partner," Elias admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "He saved my life that day, taking the bullet meant for me. I buried him best I could, using the holster as a marker. Guess those footprints you follow were mine. I visit the site whenever I can, just to pay my respects." Sarah absorbed this information, her mind reeling from the weight of it all. Here was a man burdened by guilt and grief, hiding in plain sight while the rest of the world moved on without him. And yet, somehow, their paths had crossed because of a single cow and a misplaced hat. As the sun began to set, bathing the clearing in warm amber light, Sarah made a decision. She offered Elias a place to stay at her ranch, arguing that he deserved a chance to rebuild his life instead of wandering aimlessly through the woods. At first he refused, insisting he was too dangerous to be around. But eventually he relented, moved by Sarah's unwavering kindness. Together, they returned to Red Creek, leaving the forest and its secrets behind them. Over time, Elias proved himself to be a valuable ally, helping Sarah maintain the ranch and even teach her a thing or two about self-defense. They formed a bond built on trust and mutual respect, finding solace in each other's company. Yet, unbeknownst to either of them, their troubles were far from over. You see, the outlaws who had attacked Elias all those months ago hadn't forgotten about him. And now, with news of his reappearance spreading like wildfire, they were coming for revenge. But that, dear listener, is a story for another time. The days passed quietly at first, with Sarah and Elias settling into a rhythm that felt almost normal. By day, they worked the ranch together, fixing fences, tending to Clara, and planting crops in the small garden Sarah had started. By night, they sat on the porch, watching the stars twinkle to life above the endless expanse of desert. Elias shared stories of his past, tales of daring chases and narrow escapes, while Sarah listened intently, her fascination growing with each passing moment. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Elias carried a burden heavier than she could imagine. The outlaws who had ambushed a month ago were not just random bandits. They were part of a notorious gang known as the Blackstone Brothers. Led by the ruthless Marcus Blackstone, the gang had terrorized towns across the region, stealing gold, supplies, and anything else they could get their hands on. And now, with word of Elias' survival spreading, Marcus was determined to settle the score. Elias knew this better than anyone. He had seen the signs, the strange riders passing through town, the whispered conversations in the saloon, the uneasy glances from the local sheriff. Each detail painted a clearer picture of the storm brewing on the horizon. Yet he kept his concerns to himself, unwilling to burden Sarah with worries she didn't need to bear. Until one fateful evening, when everything changed. It started innocently enough. Sarah had gone into town for supplies, leaving Elias alone at the ranch. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Elias noticed something unusual, a faint glow emanating from the edge of the property. Curious, he grabbed his rifle and approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. What he found left him speechless. There, nestled among the tall grasses, was a message carved into the trunk of an old oak tree. "Marcus knows you're alive." Beneath it, scrawled in shaky handwriting, was another line: "Leave Red Creek or face the consequences." Elias stared at the words, his mind racing. This wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. Marcus Blackstone wasn't bluffing. He would stop at nothing to eliminate the man who had survived his gang's ambush. And worse still, Elias realized that Sarah was now caught in the crossfire, whether she liked it or not. When Sarah returned later that evening, carrying sacks of flour and sugar, she found Elias pacing anxiously on the porch. His face was pale, his jaw clenched tightly. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, setting down her burdens and stepping closer. Elias hesitated, torn between protecting her and being honest. In the end, he chose the latter. "Sarah," he began, his voice low and urgent, "we need to talk." She followed him inside, where he recounted everything, the ambush, the Blackstone brothers, and the message left earlier that day. With every word, Sarah's expression grew darker, her initial shock giving way to determination. "We can't let them win," she declared firmly once Elias had finished. "If they come for you, they'll come for me too. We have to fight back." Elias shook his head. "No, Sarah, I won't risk your life for my mistakes. You should leave, take Clara and go somewhere safe. I'll handle this myself." "Handle what?" she shot back, her voice rising. "You think I'm going to run away and abandon you? After everything we've been through? That's not who I am, Elias. And it's certainly not who you are either." Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring emotions he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Elias allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone anymore. Preparations began the next morning. Knowing the Blackstone gang wouldn't waste any time, Sarah and Elias worked tirelessly to fortify the ranch. They reinforced the wooden fence posts with iron nails, stockpiled food and water in case of prolonged siege, and even set up makeshift traps around the perimeter to slow down potential attackers. As they worked, Sarah noticed something peculiar about Elias. His movements were precise, his actions deliberate. It became clear that despite his outward calm, he was preparing for battle in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. She admired his skill, but worried about the toll it might take on him. By nightfall, the ranch was as ready as it could be. Exhausted but resolute, Sarah and Elias sat on the porch once more, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The air was heavy with anticipation, the silence broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I never thought I'd see this day again, Elias said suddenly, breaking the tension. Back when I was a lawman, I always believed justice would prevail. But after the ambush, well, let's just say I lost faith. Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. You haven't lost it yet, she said softly. And you won't, not as long as I'm here. Her words brought a rare smile to his lips, a fleeting glimpse of the man he used to be. But before either of them could say more, a distant sound shattered the peace, a low rumble, growing louder with each passing second. They're here, Elias muttered, standing abruptly and reaching for his rifle. The attack came swiftly and mercilessly. A dozen men on horseback burst onto scene, their faces obscured by bandanas, their weapons gleaming in the moonlight. Bullets whizzed through the air, striking the fence posts and shattering windows. Clara bellowed in panic, running wildly toward the barn. Elias fired first, taking down one rider before ducking behind the cover of a barrel. Sarah, armed with shotgun Elias had taught her to use, joined the fray, her aim steady despite the chaos surrounding her. Together, they fought with everything they had, using the traps and reinforcements to their advantage. But the Blackstones were relentless. Wave after wave of attackers pressed forward, their numbers overwhelming. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, an unexpected ally arrived, a group of townsfolk, led by the sheriff, who had heard the commotion and come to assist. Caught off guard, the Blackstone gang retreated, disappearing into the night with promises of vengeance ringing in the air. As the dust settled and the echoes faded, Sarah and Elias stood side by side, their hearts pounding with relief and exhaustion. In the days that followed, life at the ranch returned to some semblance of normalcy. Repairs were made, wounds tended, and lessons learned. Yet both Sarah and Elias knew that true peace would remain elusive as long as the Blackstone threat loomed over them. And so they prepared, not just for the battles ahead, but for the journey they would take together, bound by trust, courage, and an unshakable belief in the power of resilience. For in the Wild West, where danger lurked around every corner, survival wasn't just about strength. It was about unity. And as the sun rose once more over Red Creek, Sarah and Elias faced the future with unwavering resolve, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. The weeks that followed the Blackstone gang's retreat were tense, filled with a mix of cautious optimism and lingering dread. Though the immediate threat had passed, Sarah and Elias both knew Marcus Blackstone wouldn't let this go so easily. The outlaw leader was known for his obsession with revenge, and Elias' survival, along with the unexpected resistance from the townsfolk, had only fueled Marcus's hatred. During this time, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed since the day Clara returned with the stranger's hat in its mouth. What had started as a simple mystery had spiraled into something far greater, pulling her deeper into the dangerous world of the Wild West. Yet, despite the danger, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since Thomas's disappearance. Working alongside Elias, defending their home, and standing up to Blackstones gave her strength she never knew she possessed. Elias, too, underwent a transformation. Gone was the haunted man who had arrived at Sarah's ranch months ago, burdened by guilt and loss. In his place stood someone more confident, more determined, a man willing to fight, not just for himself, but for those he cared about. He trained tirelessly, honing his skills while teaching Sarah advanced techniques for self-defense. Together, they mapped out strategies for potential future attacks, identifying weak points around a ranch and reinforcing them further. But even as they prepared for war, there were moments of peace. Nights spent under the vast starry sky, sharing stories and laughter, reminded them both of what truly mattered. Sarah often marveled at how different her life had become. She no longer saw herself as merely a widow trying to survive. She was now part of something bigger, something meaningful. And through it all, Elias remained by her side, not just as an ally, but as a friend whose presence brought comfort and hope. One morning, as the sun painted the horizon in hues of gold and crimson, Sarah noticed something unusual near the riverbank. While fetching water for the garden, she spotted faint tracks leading away from the usual path. Curious, she followed them, her heart quickening as the trail led her deeper into the forest. The air grew cooler here, the sunlight filtering through dense pines, casting dappled shadows across the ground. After walking for some time, she came upon a hidden clearing she had never seen before. At its center stood an old wooden cross, partially buried beneath moss and fallen leaves. Engraved on the weathered were the words Thomas Whitmore. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch the cross, her mind racing with questions. How had she missed this? Why was it here, so far from the ranch? Most importantly, did this mean Thomas's fate was finally revealed? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of rustling nearby. Turning sharply, she saw Elias emerge from the trees, his face grave. "I've been looking for you," he said, quietly stepping closer. "When I couldn't find you at the house, I figured you'd come out here." Sarah gestured toward the cross, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know anything about this? Is it real?" Elias nodded solemnly. "I do. After we buried Clara's hat and discovered the holster, I suspected there might be more clues about your husband's disappearance. So, I searched the area near where the footprints ended. This is what I found. Unbelievable. All these years, Sarah had wondered what happened to Thomas, whether he was alive or dead, lost or taken. Now, staring at the crude marker bearing his name, she felt a wave of emotions crash over her: sadness, anger, relief, and finally, acceptance. "He didn't leave me," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "He didn't abandon us." "No," Elias agreed softly. "It looks like he got into trouble. Maybe with the same kind of people who attacked me. There were signs of a struggle here, though nothing definitive. Whoever did this left no trace behind except this." Sarah sank to her knees, placing a hand on the ground beside the cross. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of closure, of finally knowing the truth after all these years. Elias crouched beside her, offering silent support, his own expression tinged with sorrow for the pain she had endured. Back at the ranch, the discovery of Thomas's resting place added new urgency to their preparations. With Marcus Blackstone still at large and likely plotting his next move, Sarah and Elias redoubled their efforts. They reached out to neighboring ranchers, forming alliances and gathering intelligence about the Blackstone gang's movements. Word spread quickly among the townsfolk, many of whom remembered Marcus's brutal raids from years past. A growing coalition of farmers, merchants, and former lawmen began organizing covert meetings, planning ways to counter the gang once and for all. Meanwhile, Clara, the ever-loyal cow, continued to play an unexpected role in their lives. One evening, as Sarah milked her, the animal suddenly stiffened, her ears perking up. Moments later, a low growl echoed through the night, a sound neither Sarah nor Elias recognized immediately. Grabbing their weapons, they ventured outside cautiously, scanning the darkness for any sign of danger. What they found shocked them. Hidden in the shadows near the barn was a massive wolf, its fur matted with blood, its eyes gleaming with pain and defiance. It snarled again, lunging forward slightly before collapsing onto the ground. Clearly injured, without hesitation, Sarah rushed to help the creature, her compassion overriding any fear. Elias joined her, using his knowledge of first aid to tend to the wolf's wounds. Over the following days, the animal gradually recovered, earning the nickname Ghost due to its ghostly white coat. Though wary at first, Ghost eventually warmed to Sarah and Elias, becoming another unlikely member of their makeshift family. As the weeks turned into months, tensions escalated once again. Scouts reported sightings of Blackstone gang members lurking near the outskirts of Red Creek, their numbers increasing with each passing day. Marcus was assembling a force unlike anything the town had faced before, determined to crush anyone standing in his way. Knowing they couldn't withstand such an assault alone, Sarah and Elias traveled to the nearest major settlement, seeking reinforcements. Along the way, they encountered other victims of the Blackstones' tyranny. Families displaced, businesses destroyed, lives ruined. Each story strengthened their resolve, reminding them why they fought. Upon reaching the settlement, they met with Sheriff Jenkins, a grizzled veteran of countless showdowns against outlaws. Impressed by their determination, Jenkins rallied a posse of volunteers, promising to return to Red Creek and confront Marcus head-on. But he warned them this would be no ordinary battle. The Blackstones were cunning, ruthless, and well-armed. Victory would require every ounce of skill, strategy, and courage they could muster. When the day of reckoning finally arrived, the skies above Red Creek darkened with storm clouds, matching the somber mood below. The combined forces of Sarah, Elias, the townsfolk, and Sheriff Jenkins's posse gathered at the edge of the ranch, ready to face whatever came their way. Horses pawed nervously at the ground. Rifles glinted in the dim light, and faces bore expressions of grim determination. In the distance, the Blackstone gang appeared, riding hard and fast, their banners snapping in the wind. At their helm was Marcus, his imposing figure commanding attention. His cold, calculating gaze swept over defenders, daring them to make a move. "You don't belong here," Marcus shouted, his voice carrying across the open space. "This land belongs to me and mine. Surrender now or face destruction." Elias stepped forward, his stance unwavering. "Your reign of terror ends today, Marcus. We won't back down." The outlaw leader laughed, a harsh, menacing sound. "We'll see about that." With a wave of his hand, the Blackstones charged, beginning a clash that would test the limits of human endurance. Bullets flew, dust swirled, and shouts filled the air as the two sides clashed in a brutal struggle. Sarah fought with ferocity, her training paying off as she took down several attackers. Elias moved like a shadow, striking swiftly and efficiently, his experience as a lawman guiding his actions. Ghost, surprisingly, proved invaluable, using his agility and instincts to distract and disorient enemies. Despite their best efforts, however, the Blackstones seemed unstoppable. Wave after wave of riders poured in, overwhelming the defenders. Just when all seemed lost, an unexpected twist occurred. From the tree line emerged a group of Native American warriors, their faces painted with war markings, their arrows finding their marks with deadly precision. These were allies Sarah and Elias hadn't known they had. Tribespeople displaced by the Blackstones' encroachments now joined the fight to reclaim their stolen lands. Together, the united forces pushed back against the Blackstones, turning the tide of battle. Marcus, realizing defeat was imminent, attempted to flee, but Elias pursued him relentlessly. Cornering the outlaw leader near the riverbank, Elias delivered a final blow, ending Marcus's reign of terror once and for all. In the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the wounded were tended to, Sarah and Elias stood amidst the ruins of the battlefield, surveying the damage done. Though victorious, they mourned the losses incurred, vowing never to forget those who had sacrificed everything for the cause of justice. As the sun rose over Red Creek, casting light on a new dawn, Sarah turned to Elias, her smile warm and genuine. "We made it," she said simply. "We did," he replied, returning her smile. "And we'll keep making it, as long as we stand together." With that, they returned to the ranch, ready to rebuild, heal, and embrace the future that awaited them. For in the Wild West, where challenges were constant and victories hard-won, the bonds formed in adversity proved stronger than any storm. And as the stars twinkled above, Sarah and Elias knew they had found not just survival, but a second chance at life, one worth fighting for, one worth cherishing forever. The days following the battle against the Blackstone gang were a mix of exhaustion and rejuvenation. Though victorious, the costs had been high. The ranch bore scars, fences broken, fields trampled, and structures damaged, but none of it compared to the emotional toll on those who had fought. Sarah and Elias worked tirelessly to repair the damage, their hands callous and weary, but their spirits unbroken. Ghost, now a permanent fixture around the ranch, followed them closely, his loyalty unwavering. As they rebuilt, whispers of their triumph spread throughout the region. Tales of the widow and the former lawman who had united a fractured community to defeat the notorious Marcus Blackstone became legend. Strangers passing through Red Creek tipped their hats in respect, while old acquaintances offered help without hesitation. For the first time in years, there was a sense of unity among the people, a shared understanding that strength lay not in isolation, but in standing together. Yet, even as life began to return some semblance of normalcy, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't finished. There were still unanswered questions, lingering mysteries buried beneath the surface. Most pressing of all was the truth about Thomas's disappearance. The cross by the riverbank provided closure, yes, but it didn't explain how or why he had met his end. And deep down, Sarah felt an undeniable pull toward uncovering the full truth, not just for herself, but for justice. One afternoon, as Clara grazed lazily in the pasture and Ghost lounged in the shade of the barn, Sarah approached Elias with a question she'd been pondering for weeks. "Do you think we'll ever know what really happened to Thomas?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. Elias paused, setting down the hammer he'd been using to mend a fence post. "I believe so," he replied after a moment's thought. "But finding out will require digging deeper than we've gone before." Sarah nodded, her determination evident. "Then let's dig." Together, they decided to revisit the site where the cross marking Thomas's resting place had been found. Armed with shovels and supplies, they ventured into the forest once more, retracing the steps that had led them there initially. Along the way, Sarah noticed something peculiar: tracks that hadn't been there before. Fresh ones. Following the trail, they arrived at a clearing they hadn't seen during their previous visit. At its center stood a small, weathered cabin, half hidden by overgrown vegetation. Its windows were boarded up, and the door hung crookedly on rusted hinges. It looked abandoned, yet somehow deliberate. "What is this place?" Sarah murmured, her hand instinctively reaching for the revolver Elias had insisted she carry. "I don't know," Elias admitted, "but I suspect it holds answers." Carefully, they entered the cabin, their footsteps creaking on the wooden floorboards. Inside, the air was stale, carrying the faint scent of mildew and decay. Dust coated every surface, obscuring the details of furniture long left untouched. But then Sarah spotted something unusual: a locked chest sitting in the corner, its metal edges tarnished but unmistakably intact. Elias examined the lock, his fingers tracing the intricate mechanism. After several attempts, he managed to pick it open, revealing its contents: letters, maps, and photographs yellow with age. Among them was a journal, its leather cover cracked and fragile. "This must belong to someone connected to Thomas," Sarah whispered, flipping through the pages carefully. As she read, her eyes widened in disbelief. "It's him," she said finally, her voice trembling. "These entries are written by Thomas." Elias leaned closer, peering over her shoulder. Together, they pieced together the fragmented narrative within. According to the journal, Thomas had stumbled upon evidence of illegal activities involving the Blackstone gang: smuggling routes, hidden caches of stolen goods, and alliances with corrupt officials. Fearing for his family's safety, he had documented everything, intending to expose the operation. But before he could act, he had been ambushed and killed. The final entry described his desperate attempt to hide the evidence, entrusting it to a trusted friend named Jacob Harper, who lived in a neighboring town. If anything happened to him, Thomas wrote, Jacob would ensure the truth came to light. With renewed purpose, Sarah and Elias set out to find Jacob Harper. Traveling across dusty trails and rugged terrain, they eventually reached a modest settlement nestled between rolling hills. Inquiring about Jacob, they learned he had passed away years ago, leaving behind a daughter named Emily. Emily, a kind-hearted woman in her 30s, welcomed them warmly despite their unexpected arrival. When Sarah explained their mission, Emily retrieved a bundle of documents her father had safeguarded until the right moment. Among them were detailed records of the Blackstone gang's crimes, including locations of hidden stashes and names of accomplices. These could bring them down completely, Elias remarked, studying the papers. If we take these to the authorities, no one will ever doubt the Blackstone's guilt again. But Sarah hesitated. What if exposing this puts others in danger? Or worse, what if parts of it are still happening? She was right. Even without Marcus leading them, remnants of the Blackstone gang remained active, hiding in plain sight under new aliases. Recklessly exposing the information could spark retaliation, endangering innocent lives. After much deliberation, they devised a plan to leak portions of the evidence gradually, ensuring each revelation was backed by irrefutable proof. This way, they could dismantle the network piece by piece, minimizing collateral damage. Back at the ranch, Sarah and Elias implemented their strategy with precision. Using contacts made during their travels, they delivered anonymous tips to law enforcement agencies across the region. Each disclosure chipped away at the Blackstone's influence, unraveling their empire thread by thread. Meanwhile, life at the ranch flourished. With the threat diminished, Sarah expanded her garden, experimenting with crops she'd never tried before. Elias taught her advanced techniques for managing livestock, turning Clara into a model dairy cow whose milk fetched premium prices at market. Ghost, now fully recovered, became a beloved companion, often accompanying them on rides through the countryside. Their bond deepened with time, evolving beyond friendship into something neither could quite define. Nights spent sharing stories under the stars gave way to quiet moments of reflection, where words weren't needed to convey understanding. They supported each other through challenges, celebrated small victories, and embraced the simple joys of living freely. Months later, news arrived that confirmed their efforts had paid off. The last remnants of the Blackstone gang had been apprehended, their operations dismantled permanently. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served. For Sarah, it marked the end of a chapter she had never imagined closing. For Elias, it brought peace, a chance to start anew, free from the shadows of his past. Standing together on the porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, Sarah turned to Elias with a smile. "We did it," she said softly. "We did," he agreed, returning her gaze. "And whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the stars began to twinkle above, casting their light upon the land they had fought so hard to protect, Sarah and Elias knew they had found not just survival, but a home, a place where courage, resilience, and love intertwined to create a legacy worth remembering. In the Wild West, where legends were born and battles waged, theirs was a story that would endure, carried forward by the winds of time and the hearts of those who heard it.